You're listening to 99.1 WQRT LP Indianapolis, and welcome to Radio Free Book Club. I'm Ken Honeywell. I'm a writer and reader from Indianapolis, and this is our first show. Today we're going to be discussing Emily St. John Mandel's novel, Sea of Tranquility, and I'm joined in the studio today by three other club members whom I'd love to have introduce themselves. Craig, why don't we start with you?
Hi, I'm Craig Von Dalen. I am a father, an architect, a real estate developer, and evidently I can now call myself a philanthropist, which is nice. I've been working here in the southeast side of downtown Indianapolis in the Fletcher Place, Holy Rosary, and Fountain Square neighborhood as a landowner and property developer and helping different organizations get started.
Thanks, Craig. Tracy?
I'm Tracy Kumbe, a marketing writer, bread baker, hiker, mulch mover, and kind of an education junkie. I also read a lot and make fun of my 17-year-old kid.
He's a good one to make fun of. Thanks, Tracy. Steve?
My name's Steve Woods, and I am married with 3 children. I am a financial advisor, an avid reader, and I have a side hustle. I am an NFL football official.
Thanks, Steve Woods. I remember when Steve Woods was an Indiana high school football official many a moon ago. Well, thanks, everybody. We're glad you're here. And since this is our first show, I just wanted to give a little background about what we're doing and what you can expect as a listener. So every month, we're going to choose a contemporary novel, usually something published, say, within the last year, and we're going to talk about it book club style. This is a book club where we will actually talk about the book. Might be a little different from some of the book clubs some of us have been in the past, but that's what we're going to do with this one. Please also understand this is not a book review show. There will be spoilers, and we're not going to interview authors. There are lots of shows like that. In fact, Emily St. John Mandel has done a lot of interviews around this book, but that is not what we're doing here. As I said, there will be spoilers. We'll almost certainly talk about what happens at the end of the book. So if you don't want to know what happens, now would be a good time to stop listening and come back after you've read the book, and we hope you will. And so why are we doing this? Well, I guess I'll speak for myself. But it's because I think we love reading, and I think reading novels is important. There's a lot of research that suggests reading fiction makes you more open-minded, more empathetic, more compassionate. The Harvard Business Review, of all publications, everybody, says that research suggests that reading literary fiction is an effective way to enhance the brain's ability to keep an open mind while processing information, a necessary skill for effective decision-making. So see, there are good business reasons to be reading fiction as well. But I really think for me, stories, fiction helps us see the world through other people's eyes in a way nothing else really can. You know, novels especially allow you to get deep into other people's minds. And I've had a lot of people say, well, those are just made-up people, but I would say to that, it doesn't really matter because we really can't get into each other's heads, and we are kind of unreliable narrators of our own lives, I think. And I think fiction is the closest we can actually get to understanding what it's like to be in somebody else's head. So that's why I'm doing it, and I hope that everybody out there will come along with us. So with that, let's just dive in and talk about what's been a pretty popular book this spring and this summer, Emily St. John Mandel's Sea of Tranquility. And I'd love for someone to give us a quick synopsis of the book.
Sure. This is a novel that spans 500 years in just about 200 pages through a handful of lives that are connected by a paranormal experience in a forest. And we first experienced that through the eyes of an outcast in 1912, and eventually through one of the key players in the year 2401. This book is a mystery about what this paranormal experience might mean and how it originated. And it's a very suspenseful family drama across 3 families I'd call it a work of speculative fiction that almost seems unconcerned with its own world building. And that paranormal experience is at the center of it. There's time travel, there are moon colonies, there's a plague, and all of that really is peripheral to what matters. The connections among the people, the range of our powers to affect each other, and the judgments we have to make about what matters. This is also the kind of book that as soon as I finished it, and I'll confess, I did not love it. I did not rush to the Kindle to get back into this. But as soon as it was done, I wanted to start it over again. And that's because it's super complicated and it gets wrapped up in what I think is a really elegant way. I wanted to get back and kind of see the scaffolding after I got through it.
Yeah, I mean, Tracy, you're famously not a science fiction reader.
This is true.
But yeah, I think I agree with you, and I also was really interested in how it went together, and also will say up front, didn't love everything about it. But yeah, thanks. I'm sorry. Did we stop in the middle of that? Did you have more to go?
We didn't. I feel like that was it. But
yeah,
but
awesome.
Did that seem like what that book was to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a really good synopsis. So yeah, let's.
No, yeah, I thought it was a good synopsis, but I'm a science fiction guy. So if I read books, it's more than likely that if it's a science fiction book. And I should have done in my introduction is I'm not a reader, and I'm doing this because I need to read more, and it's like a good impetus for me to read more.
Awesome. You're exactly the audience we're looking for.
Perfect.
Greg.
But I read this as a science fiction novel, and I liked it. So I didn't find a lot of flaws in it. But what I found was I would read it and I'd put it down for a day or two, and then I'd pick it back up again and I'd start reading it and I'd go, oh God, I got to go back 15 pages and figure out what was going on.
Right.
Because it's very disjointed and the names are unusual and I'm not good with names. So I've got to go back and figure out, oh, who's this Gasper guy? Why does he keep showing up? But the only thing I would say is, yeah, to me, it was a very good science fiction novel.
Mm.
Yeah.
I am not a science fiction fan, but I think to Tracy's point that she kind of in a sneaky way got us into this science fiction realm. And I say sneaky because, and this is one of the things I wanted to maybe talk about later, was the technology of how they did this was never really discussed. It was just kind of understood. If we went back in time, nobody could explain how we use a cell phone, and she treated the time machine just like that. So I found that interesting in how she just kind of sidestepped the entire conversation, and I think that would have added to the 200 pages if she tried to get into the science of it. But I did find that it was a page turner. A very good indication is if I'm thinking about it when I'm not reading it, if I'm excited to go to bed to read it, and that kind of checked all the boxes. Like the two of you, I left with some concerns where I didn't love it, but I really liked it.
Yeah, I think I felt a lot the same, Steve. And I have to say I was a big fan of Station 11. I know.
Same here.
And I know, Steve, you have read Station 11 too. And I know, Craig, you just started watching the very good HBO adaptation. It really is very good, I think. Not as good as the book. Not really surprised there, but a really nice adaptation. And I thought The Glass Hotel, her next novel, was fabulous. And there was a little bit I didn't like about that, and we could maybe get into that a little bit. But and I know, Tracy, you've read all three of those books. Steve, have you read The Glass Hotel?
I'm reading it now.
Oh, you're reading it now. Obviously, there are some overlaps among all three of those books. Really, there are recurring characters particularly from The Glass Hotel to Sea of Tranquility. And do you remember those overlaps, Tracy? Do you remember who those characters were?
Sure. We had, I don't think I can give you a book report on them, but we have Vincent, who was in The Glass Hotel, who was, I believe, the wife of a Bernie Madoff-style scammer.
Right. Jonathan Alkaitis.
and her brother.
Yeah, her brother Paul, who was the musician. And characters, played a pretty significant role. These characters from the Glass Hotel, particularly Morella, who was Vincent's friend in the Glass Hotel. But I think some of those themes that carry through. I think it's interesting that so many of Emily St. John Mandel's principal characters are displaced people. And I think that was true in those other two novels, but also in this one. With, Edwin, basically being kicked out of the family.
Right. And then Gasperi kicked out of time, really.
Right.
It's taking it to a whole new level. And I thought really that bringing in the characters from the other novel is a nice way of underscoring this point that everything is fluid and we don't know what's real.
Yeah, it's also interesting that, I think also consistent with this book, some of the characters' fates in the Glass Hotel were not the same as their fates in Sea of Tranquility. For example, Vincent's husband, Jonathan, went to prison in the Glass Hotel. In Sea of Tranquility, he fled the country and went to
Dubai.
Dubai.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like all of her works exist in a multiverse.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So someone may have gone back and futzed with the timeline a little in the same way that Gasperi's doing.
I had not thought of that, but what an interesting thought.
I mean, that point couldn't have been lost on the author, that his fate was different in each of those books. So
right.
That does make for an interesting twist.
Well, and there are also characters in Station 11 who appear in the Glass Hotel, much more minor characters. Actually, Miranda, who was the creator of the comic book, Station 11, she has a role in the Glass Hotel. But interesting. Anyway, just kind of to move along, we're talking about Sea of Tranquility. So is there anything y'all thought worked particularly well or didn't work particularly well? Craig, anything come to mind?
Well, one thing I'd go back to, and this goes back to it being a science fiction novel, and you guys mentioned how it was a short science fiction novel, and it referred to all these different technological things, like the fact that there was a colony on the moon, there was a colony on Titan, there were colonies that were in Alpha Centauri, and as a guy who, I'm very interested in the concept of traveling through space and how long it takes, and also the technology necessary in order to do that, it was actually really accurate. I was reading it, and as a person who's very interested in that type of stuff and has done, like, how long would it take to get to Alpha Centauri and what would it take to create a colony there? I've actually thought about these things myself because that's something I'm very interested in. I could not find any holes in her story. She actually has done quite a bit of research into how this could potentially evolve over time. And also, like, the keeping of the concept of the technology of the telephone or the device that you would have. I thought that was really interesting, too, because I feel like, being that it was introduced to us only recently in our society, it's definitely got staying power that's going to continue with us for a considerable period of time. And so from a technical standpoint, I can tell she really did her research. Like when she talked about the colonies on the moon, there had to be some machine that created Earth gravity on the moon in order for people to survive there appropriately. One of the things I've realized as I start studying interstellar travel, and this is just kind of one of my hobbies and interests, is gravity is the single most important thing for human life. I mean, we can recreate a lot of other things, but without gravity, we're pretty much in big trouble. And Earth gravity is what makes us what we are. But she thought about all of this stuff and put it into the novel in the technical standpoint, but still managed to keep it under 200 words or 200 pages. I thought it was really very elegantly researched and pretty well put together from that standpoint. I'm still a little mixed up on the time stuff because I'm trying to decide, so what happened first? Because Gasperi didn't play the violin until he was really later on in his life, and yet that piece was instrumental from the very beginning of the novel. So from a time standpoint, I'm a little twisted up and trying to figure it out, but it was, to me, very elegantly and technically put together from that standpoint, from the rest of the information.
It's so funny that you latch on to that stuff because I just couldn't care less about those elements of a book or this book. But one of the things that I thought was so cool is they build this colony on the moon and the lights go out and everyone just goes,
Yeah, they didn't have they didn't have the money to make it work again. And as a guy who develops real estate, I just went, yep, that could happen.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of a really cool touch. I mean, it's not that. I mean, there have been other science fiction worlds where things get shabby after a time, but just that whole idea of, this is not such a nice neighborhood anymore.
So let's pick up and move to another.
Then they did Colony 3 and they didn't have that problem. Yeah. So Colony 2 still existed, but the people that lived there just couldn't afford to live in Colony 1 or Colony 3. That's very interesting.
I thought I actually thought some of the science fictional elements were a little clumsy. Not that some of those things, as you said, Craig, weren't well researched, but I think some of them felt to me like an author who has not read a lot of science fiction, just throwing some stuff in like robot farms. And I think there was a little bit too much emphasis on the holoverse. I mean, that seemed like everyone using holograms seemed like it was like straight out of 1975 to me. Steve, any thought about that?
I think it's interesting if you're looking at it through that lens, you're going to read a different book, right?
Oh yeah.
For me, I just kind of accepted it. And I didn't really give it much thought. It was plausible. And like I said earlier, she didn't really have to go into any explanation. This simply is what it is. They have robot farmers. Okay. They have hovercrafts. They have holograms. I can visualize what that looked like as she's in a room of other authors. And, in 40 years, maybe we could do this virtually instead of all having to be together. So I didn't really get hung up on that, and nor did it really distract me. I just kind of accept that in that whole kind of suspension of disbelief, although I think it's plausible. And I think that that's not too much of a stretch moving, 100 or 300 years into the future.
Well, if it wasn't, to me, I'm sort of obsessive compulsive about that kind of stuff. And if it wasn't plausible in my mind based upon the research that I've done, it would have fallen apart. So the fact that she did the research and actually everything she had in there seemed to, and obviously I'm not a physicist, but to me it seemed very plausible based upon all the research that I've done in the past. And I think that's really important because I would have been, had it been like something goofy, I would have gone, I'm not so interested anymore.
Yeah. Well, there's a big element of the story that I'm really of two minds about, and that is the whole book tour. I think it is ludicrous to imagine that in the year whatever it is in the future, there are going to be still a bunch of bookstores on Earth and authors coming from the moon to do book tours. I'm sad to say that. At the same time, I think some of that was like among the most delightful stuff in the book. That really was, it was autofiction. I mean, some of that stuff, is stuff that she has been experiencing as an author who wrote a book about a pandemic on the eve of a pandemic.
Like the interaction with her drivers and so forth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I disagree with you, Ken. I think that type of publicity tour for any type of media is going to exist for a very long time. And I hope bookstores don't go away.
Well, I do too. I just wasn't buying it.
Well, and
Yeah.
especially since we learned that she could have been doing it holographically.
Exactly.
Why go to the expense, right?
Yeah, but holographically, I mean, it's just like during the pandemic, live music is still a lot more interesting and to me more. I'd much rather go watch live music or see somebody in person than turn on a computer and watch them. So I think there's a dynamic there that's very human. That's, I think, very important as well.
And I think it still taps into the fact that we want to meet these people. It's exciting to meet someone that has written a book that you really like, and just to go and ask questions. Or, at one point in the book, there's a woman that just kind of throws her hands up and is frustrated with the way Marion Bad ended. So I think that we're always going to want that personal touch. So that wasn't all that much. But Ken, I would also ask, do you own any records?
You mean like LPs?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I mean, that kind of contradicts a little bit back. I mean, we have such better sound quality now.
Well, now as a record guy, I would say that's not necessarily true.
But it's still that kind of throwback, I think.
Right.
And we have some, if you tap into that nostalgia, I think there's something romantic about it. And having the opportunity to go and sit in front of someone who you admire is going to transcend kind of time, I think. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not objecting to the. I think that would be awesome if there are still book tours and bookshops all over the broken up United States in the future into a bunch of different countries, United Carolina, and I forget what they all were. But yeah, I hope that happens. I'm just not sure that I'm buying it.
The city-state of Los Angeles, sorry.
A lot has been made of this autofiction element. And typically, I would say, who cares? It's not really our business how much of the fiction is real life. But I think in this instance, it's an especially cheeky element that ties into the whole what's real and what's not element of the book. Overall, the, is it a simulation? Is this an author toying with us, etc.?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I loved a lot of it. I mean, I loved a lot of the interaction with the, someone who was interviewing her and asked her how many she'd sold, and she apologized for not having brought her royalty statements to the interview. So much of that just actually happened on her book tour. But I also want to say I loved, probably one of my favorite parts of the book was when she was in the Holoverse during the pandemic, talking about post-apocalyptic fiction and the popularity of post-apocalyptic fiction. She's in her future world, over the last 10 years or so, but which, of course, is analogous to today. There's been post-apocalyptic fiction has been really popular, and she had a bunch of interesting thoughts about that.
Yeah, I made some notes. I wanted to just read a couple of those passages. One was, perhaps we believe on some level that if the world were to end and be remade, if some unthinkable catastrophe were to occur, then perhaps we might be remade too, perhaps into better, more heroic, more honorable people. And she also writes, I think that, and this is in a part where she's talking on her book tour, I think that as a species, we have a desire to believe we're living at the climax of the story. It's a kind of narcissism. We want to believe we're uniquely important, that we're living in the end of history, that now, after all these millennia of false alarms, now is finally the worst it's ever been, that finally we've reached the end of the world. But what if it always is the end of the world? This is the mind scrambler, because we might reasonably think of the end of the world as a continuous and never ending process, which is an oxymoron, but I think spot on.
Yeah,
we
that's
do always
really
think
prescient.
it's catastrophic.
Right.
Yeah. That explains basically. I hate this whole post-apocalyptic like movies and books thing that we're in because I'm a very optimistic person. But that passage explains the reasoning behind it better than anything I've ever heard.
What do you mean?
That it's like we as a society feel like we're at the pinnacle now, so it can only be downhill from this point. And I think that's really one of the reasons that when you describe what you said in that quote from her, that's one of the reasons why post-apocalyptic literature and movies and everything are so popular, because people think, well, it can't get any better than this, so it has to only get worse. And the end is now because this is the pinnacle of our society. And I don't think it is, frankly. I think that things are only going to continue to get better. There's going to be hiccups and slowdowns, and things are going to go badly periodically. But I got to believe that it's just going to get better over time.
I think it's all ending, and I think that's sort of the message of this book.
Yeah, but it's been ending for the last 3,000 years.
No, exactly.
Yes.
I think an important point is that we're just a blip. We're nothing. So this life that might feel long is, in terms of space and time, just nothing.
Yeah.
And so Gaspry, who ended up in prison, and he was saying, all stars burn out. Was that the line?
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, his cellmate, when he writes that, looks at it optimistically. Nothing lasts forever, so being in prison won't last forever.
Well, and by the way, that cellmate was Jonathan Alcaides's cellmate in the Glass Hotel.
Holy cow!
Was
Right.
it equally as positive?
I don't remember exactly. He was an interesting character. I mean, I remembered. I had to go, wait a minute. I remember that guy, and just go back and make sure that he was in that. Yeah. Yeah, I think I want to come back to one of your comments, Tracy, but I also want to ask: is it the other thing? One of the other things she said is that post-apocalyptic literature is popular because we all secretly wish for a world with less technology. Any reaction to that? That kind of felt kind of true to me.
Oh, I would agree with that. I'm tired of it. I don't want this thing with me all the time anymore.
I love my technology.
I don't.
I love it. I want it. I need it.
My best time of the day is when I get up in the morning and I leave this by my bed and I go out on my terrace and I sit there for 15 or 20 minutes and I don't even think about that.
I think the reality is we all want that, but none of us are willing to give it up.
That's probably it.
And you talk to someone that's been on a vacation, like, oh, it's great. I didn't look at my phone at all. I didn't have any worries. And but at the end of the day, these are literally on some people's hips, right? And we are tethered to technology from how I got to this place with my IMAP app and talking on the phone as I was hands-free, driving in the car. I think we do want that. And I think, to her point, maybe the only way we get there is with something awful happening to return us to something that was once better. And maybe that's the point. If we're at this pinnacle, I think historically we all look back to the good old days and when things were easier. And my kids, when we were kids, we just had to be at home when the lights turned on. And now you've got parents with the 360 app that can pinpoint the location of your child at any moment. Does that make us better parents than our parents were? Probably not.
Makes you different parents.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have 360, by the way.
So, Tracy, I want to come back to that thought about we might reasonably think of the end of the world as a continuous and never-ending process. I think that's such an interesting thought. And it really struck me in this book for the first time when Edwin was back in England after the war, after he'd been in World War I, and was talking with his mother, or there was a reflection about his mother, who no longer, her face lit up when she talked about the Raj. And he realized that that world was gone. And that's continued to strike me just kind of over and over again, how things just continually end. Like the world I grew up in. I mean, I'm younger than all of you guys. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and that world is gone. I just think that's a really interesting thought. It struck me more than once just in reading other things that it happens continually.
Was that addressed to anybody?
That's not addressed to anyone in particular, but if anybody wants to say anything.
That's a process that's been going on in human society for like 20,000 years. I mean, the Romans would dig up the antiquities of the Etruscans and go, wow, these people had indoor plumbing 2,000 years ago. We dig up the Romans' ruins and go, wow, these people had indoor plumbing 2,000 years ago. So it's just a constant, like we have societies become prevalent and grow and develop technology. The Greeks had computers. They found one in the Mediterranean Sea about 70 years ago. They're still trying to understand it. These things happen, and then so societies grow up, they die. They grow up, they die. It's just an unending process. That's why, like the end is a process, and we may be in the beginning of the end, but they were probably in the beginning of the end 4,000 years ago when the Etruscans were the society of our planet. So it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Which makes her point all the more.
Oh, yeah, and we're Then you think about, like, there are 150 million star systems in the solar system that we're in, the Milky Way. There are 500 million solar systems like the Milky Way. That's a lot. And we can't even, to travel to the nearest star that's near, which she mentioned, the colonies of Alpha Centauri, it's 4.3 million light years away. It would probably take us at speeds that we can actually understand 50 to 60 years to get there. That's just the nearest star to us. We can't even fathom the concept of going to another galaxy, which is millions of light years away. I mean, we are like literally nothing, both in the timeline of the Earth, but also in the universe that we actually exist in. It's amazing how we have huge egos, but we're really nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Well, let's talk about that existence for a minute, or lack of existence. It's postulated in this book, it's a big part of the story, that perhaps we're living in a simulation. Is there anything in the story that you think, really examined objectively, you think should convince characters that they were living in a simulation? And are we living in a simulation? And does it matter if we are?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to inject again. I apologize. But the reality is, if you look at most religions, they would say that the human body is just a vessel for either the soul or the consciousness or anything like that. So we very well may be living in a simulation, even within the context of our understanding it from a religion and philosophical standpoint. But I will say this, the math of that type of simulation is a math that we have yet to get even close to fathoming.
Yeah, but obviously the story centers around the anomaly, and we know ultimately what happened, what the anomaly was. The anomaly was Gasperi. But does that mean we're living in a simulation, or is that, possibly just evidence of the non-linearity of time?
Go ahead, Tracy.
Is this one of those things that makes people read science fiction? Because I can't even stand to think about this. I'm here. I have headphones on. It feels real. That's good enough.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's
my question.
Got to.
Right. Does it really matter if we are?
Yeah, I would say no. I don't know, Steve. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say it reminded me of a couple things. One, I think I had read in college about Wittgenstein with his brains in a vat theory. And if we get fact check, forgive me, but I think that he had said something to the effect of, if you can question your consciousness, it's not a simulation, because a simulation wouldn't allow that type of questioning. Now that you think about The Matrix, which is another franchise that delves into the simulation, and those characters at the beginning were literally in a vat of, that gel that Neo came out of. Morpheus would just have said that part of his questioning was baked into the simulation. So it really can be explained away on both sides. And I heard the author talk in a podcast about how she's read very intelligent people that can argue both sides. So, for me, it didn't really hit like it was a simulation. I just didn't buy that.
Yeah, I would guess ultimately, I don't even think it matters to the story. I'm not even sure it was worth even bringing into the story. I think the time travel and the anomaly was enough, and the way it got wrapped up was probably enough.
I totally agree.
Yeah, the author brought it in. I mean, she basically, but I think that the concept would be that it would be a lot more subtle than the Matrix concept of you're in a vat and they just create a world for you to live in. It seems like it's a lot more like the 21 grams thing, of that you've got something inside of you that is not attached to your body, that when you die goes somewhere else. So, and then that's the simulation concept of where does it go? And then what happens, and is this just a simulation that's been created by a far more intelligent entity that we occupy? I think her concept is far more like deep than the vat of than the Matrix concept.
But you know what was so great for me in this book? There's all this time travel, and there's Gasperi stressing out about whether he is going to intervene or not intervene, and taking action. And in one case, he does have an effect by intervening, and in another case, all he does is change a person's time of death by about 48 hours.
Right, but here's what I want to know about that, Tracy. Why did he? Because the war really screwed up Edwin. We knew that was going to happen. Gasperi knew that was going to happen. Why did he not go back even further and tell Edwin not to go to war? I mean, if he was really going to affect people's lives like he did Olive's for a reason, I think ultimately what bugged me the most about the book was it seemed too easy for him to just kind of, decide he was going to save Olive's life.
And then there really weren't repercussions for that. He had been warned endlessly about the repercussions of futzing with the timeline, and then he did it, and he basically got a slap on the wrist and got sent back out again. Yeah,
he did it just too easily, I thought. I just didn't buy it. I mean, I guess that's a question. Could anyone in this room, resist messing with the timeline?
Absolutely not.
You couldn't resist doing it?
Yeah.
No, I would be tinkering left and right.
That's what I loved about Gasperi is he's like, I can't, and it was almost like a setup where he did this on purpose because he knew he was going to go back and play with it. Because he's like, I can't let somebody die that I'm going to meet that I could save. And I like that about his character. He's willing to do that. I think with the poor gentleman from England, he would have had to go to war regardless because he was a British citizen during World War I. But he could
have stayed in Canada.
Yeah, but he didn't want him to die depressed. He wanted him to. He knew he was going to die, but not depressed and not in such a horrible state.
Yeah. Well, why do you think it was so hard to find people who wanted to time travel? That was one thing that was kind of bugging me, was like, wouldn't you want to time travel?
Well, because they had to find people that wouldn't tinker. I mean, because all of us said, well, I would go back and fix something.
Yeah. I thought it was clumsy that the one guy who recruited, what was the guy's name who recruited Gaspry?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Ephraim.
Ephraim.
Yeah.
But he had a quota. He was behind in his quota. That's why, he embraced Gaspry.
Well, that's why they fast-tracked him.
Right. They fast-tracked him, but the fast track was like 5 years. Right. Wasn't this an interesting enough problem that they had someone who could go next week?
And you've got this institution, this time institute that is shrouded in secrecy, and this kind of bumbling security worker at a hotel gets his way into this and suddenly becomes an agent of change. That part was a little frustrating for me. I just didn't buy the fact that just because he really wanted to, that he could do it. I mean, maybe he knew too much and that's why they let him in, or because Ephraim needed to hit his quota.
Well, plus he also had that time-traveling cat that his sister gave him.
I think Zoe planned it from the very beginning.
That you might...
I think it was her plan. She even says in the book she was the best. She was the one person that... I think she planned the whole thing from the very beginning to save Llewellyn.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But by the way, that brings up the biggest problem I had with this book was time travel. I hate time travel. It's so messy.
You'd love it.
I love science fiction, but time travel gets so messy.
It does get messy, but I think she did a pretty good job of wrapping everything up, with the exception of one thing. I don't know why Morella had to be involved at the murder scene in Ohio. That did not make even a little bit of sense to me. They could have completely avoided that weirdness.
Right. That was just that extra dash of salt. Nope, too much, too far.
Right. So I have one last question, and then we're going to have to kind of close. And that's, at the end, Gaspry is thinking about time. He's in his new life. He's realized that he is the anomaly. And the last line is he's thinking about being a still point in a ceaseless rush. What do you think about that as the ending of the book? And is that a fitting ending? What does that mean to you?
Is it the maturity that he has now come out on the other side and realizes that that's the only kind of explanation to what he's experienced? Because basically he went through time and kind of screwed up a bunch of stuff. I kind of thought about, I've always hated Curious George, and he created his own problem and then solves it, and at the end comes out with this kind of understanding of what time and his place in it is all about. But he made his own bed with all of that, and that part is a little frustrating, I thought, in reading it. And I just kind of thought of Curious George in that respect.
Honestly, this book has so much movement in it, from moon to earth and century to century, that getting to the end with a line about stillness was very confusing to me. I really don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. Craig, any thought?
Super aspirational. That's where I want to be. At my point in my life right now, that's where I want to be, a still point in a rush. Just hang out. Hopefully my kids come to me for advice.
Yeah. Well, I'm supposed to be retiring, and so you would think that would be, that's a very attractive idea to me. So just, what do you guys think? Good book? Recommend it? Think others should read it? Tracy?
I would point people to Station 11 first. That book is so compelling and has really stuck with me. And this one, I think probably after I leave here, I won't think about again.
Yeah. Craig, what do you think?
I liked it. I'm I found it. I didn't know what to think when I started, because I started reading. I'm like, this is really disjointed and confusing. But as I started getting into it and the story started coming together, I started to really like it. And I mean, I literally read the half of the book in probably a day or 2 days.
Yeah.
So I started to enjoy it.
Yeah. Steve Woods, what do you think?
I think a beach read. I think it's a page turner. It keeps your attention. It's not very long, and you can rip through it, and you come up with some questions, whether you like it or not, and it's thought provoking.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just say I agree with Tracy. I would suggest, if you're going to read it, read Station 11 and then read The Glass Hotel and then read this. That's probably the best. And those novels go in descending quality for me. I think Station 11 is great, and I think The Glass Hotel is really, really good. And this one was a fun read. Okay, well, before we go, let's do a quick round of recommendations. What else you reading, and what else? What would you recommend, Craig Von Dalen?
I'm not the reader, but I have been reading a lot of books on social equity, and I find them very interesting. And basically, the history of race relations in the United States of America. Not it's very like intellectual things, but not entertaining. As far as like what I like to read when it comes to science fiction, I really enjoyed when I was younger, and I still do, the works from Isaac Asimov. I think his work is pretty fantastic. Unfortunately, very difficult to translate into a more popular medium, which is movies and television.
Yeah, I know Apple made
it was terrible.
Foundation. I didn't watch it.
Terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to, hopefully you give us another book to read, because it gives me something to do.
Yeah.
Laurel gives me books all the time, and I read.
Yeah, good for Laurel.
Yeah. So
Tracy Kumbe, what do you got?
Listen, the best thing happened last week. Somebody sent me a poem by a poet I'd never heard of. I don't actually read a ton of poetry, but it's Ada Limon, and she has several collections. I have read so far one called Bright Dead Things, and her latest is The Hurting Kind, which I'm reading now. And these poems, man, she has a very sharp and dark outlook, I think. And these poems are her through that looking for beauty. And it's just the coolest. They get right into my gut.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds great. Steve Woods.
I think I always love sharing recommendations, because I think it carries a lot of weight. So you've got to, if you're going to make a recommendation, you're going to get judged on this. And this is also one of my favorite questions to ask smart people, because that's a great way to find books. But I would stake my life on Amar Toll's The Lincoln Highways. That's probably the book that I've been recommending the most, and Gentleman in Moscow was also very, very good. But The Lincoln Highways was the last great book that I read that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, great recommendation. Well, for myself, all this talk about post-apocalyptic novels made me think of a book that I've cited frequently as my favorite novel of all time, and that is John Crowley's slim little novel called Engine Summer. It was published in 1979, and it's a really beautiful kind of pastoral post-apocalyptic world. Kind of maybe, per our discussion, that kind of world that we might hope for if we want to blow things up and see if we can become better people. It's really a beautiful book. It's kind of about a boy who goes on a quest to find a lost love and maybe discover the secrets of the angels, which is how these people refer to whoever came before them and left all these artifacts that they just don't know what they are. Like in the book, the boy's father, they find something that is called road, and the boy asks what it was for, and the father says, to kill people. So it's beautifully written. John Crowley is just a beautiful stylist, and I just love his writing. And the book can be a little hard to find. It's probably most readily available in a compilation of 3 novels by John Crowley with a couple of his other novels. But yeah, Engine Summer is really a beautiful, haunting book. And if you like post-apocalyptic fiction at all, I would really recommend it. Craig Von Dalen.
Interesting that the road is a thing to. I mean, that's what the Romans developed roads for, was to move their armies. So he was right.
Yeah. Well, thanks, everybody. This has been really fun. That's it for our first edition of Radio Free Book Club. Thanks to Craig Von Dalen, Tracy Kumbe, Steve Woods, and I'm Ken Honeywell. And we hope you'll join us again next month when we're going to discuss another of this year's big novels, Jennifer Egan's The Candy House.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Look for us. We're going to have a blog on Medium, so look for Radio Free Book Club on Medium. And thanks to our friends at WQRT for letting us do this. So we'll see you next month, and until then, go read a book.